Okay, so today we are taking a look at Kanban and how Kanban works. And as you can see, I have my friend the board here, the whiteboard, and this is the actual like Kanban. Like the way that Kanban works is by utilizing some kind of board, is either digital or physical. But today I am in honor of the honoring the tradition of original Kanban, which was created by Taiichi Ono, I believe in 1980 in Japan. Like they used this system in Toyota, basically like made a huge board or a series, like a set of boards, and they just put them everywhere, and they allow team to attach basic like stickers and things on the board. So that's how Kanban started. And Kanban from Japanese means board, literally, and in Korean is Kanpan. So I have the Kanpan with me here. I bought it on coupon, and it's pretty good quality actually. I just unpacked it, that's why I couldn't like put it on a stand. Didn't have enough time today, but I think that's sufficient. So this is as far as it reaches, right? Okay, perfect. So the core message of Kanban is you have to have a flow. Kanban is like a grinder, like meat grinder, not that grinder you thought about. So it's like a meat grinder. So if, for example, if Scrum is all about like talking, like people talking to each other and having a structure and understanding what they're doing, and having a set goal each sprint, like kind of time boxing things. Kanban doesn't have time boxes. That's like one of the first, most obvious differences from any other methodology. Kanban doesn't have set time boxes. It's just like a meat grinder, where you just put your work and it just continuously grinds the work through the system. So once you like have the board in some kind of like either Trello or Jira or a physical board with stickers, you divide it into some kind of into states of like of your flow. So for example, we have to do or backlog. You can have like to do or backlog. I think that's pretty thin. Is it visible? Like, is visible the line? Because if it's not visible, I can bring another one. It's not visible, I think. Okay, hold on.
No, it's fine.
Okay, I'm back with the blue one or red one. Actually, red one I think might be more visible, and the sticker. So we have this line that separates our state, like one of the stages of the flow from the others, and then we have another one. Draw another one, and then another one at the end. So, if we have like our flow, we can put our stages at the top and basically like make sure that everyone is on the same page. Everyone realizes what they're doing, like what stages we have. Usually, the stages would be to do, in progress, and done, but it's not really that restrictive. Kanban says you can go as far as to have like as many stages as you want as long as you have the flow. But let's start with the classic to do, in progress, and done. So some software development teams, they have like quality checking in between, they have design in between, like whatever you want, you name it. So here it's it's actually not as straight. uh this one, yeah, looks a little bit better. Forgive me for my drawing, but essentially the point of Kanban is you take a sticker, like you take a sticker, you put something on it, like a task. Usually, Kanban recently it tries to focus on functionality rather than technical task. So usually they would write something like a user story, something like a functionality that, okay, like as a somebody, I want something because I need to do something. So as a, let's say, as a user, I want like this software to have the ability to report things because I want to contribute to like the software quality or something like that. Or maybe as a as a administrator, as an admin, I want to have a dashboard so that I can see all the data about like all the information in one place. So usually they would write something like this in software development and good teams, but not good teams. They prefer to do it like in a very technical way, which is not exactly the purpose of which is not exactly in line with the purpose of Kanban, because Kanban, first of all, is a visual tool. It is created solely for the purpose of visualizing work. Technically, other project management methodologies and frameworks like Scrum, they don't require you to use any like any visual representation of the work, but Kanban is all about visualization. Why? So the one of the reasons of visualization is that people just have to have like some kind of flow uninterrupted, and Kanban serves this purpose perfectly because when you have a visual board with all the tasks, everything, management doesn't go down to like lower levels, like to workers in the field, and ask them all the time what are you doing, because they can just come up to the board and they can see clearly where they where they made the progress, where they didn't make the progress, and yeah, and maybe they can even like huddle people around certain things, so they can like freely have all the information and all the control over the process without micromanaging people. So Kanban is wonderful at doing that. It's like visualizing the work so that people can just work, like continuously work and not be interrupted, which I think is wonderful for things like long-term projects, which are not, done in like in 1 month or several months. For example, like construction projects or other maybe like big software development projects. They probably like all of the companies who are engaged in those type of projects, they use some kind of like visualization like Kanban, or maybe they use visualization tool, but they name it differently. But pretty much the only visualization tool made like for project management purposes that I know of is Kanban. So now that we got the basics, well, the basics are you have like again the board, you have the states like of your work, like the stages of your work, and you have something to write on or something like to describe your work, basically like like a sticker or a ticket. Like people in software development, they call it a ticket. Like other people can call it issues, like whatever you call it. It's essentially the same thing. It's one thing, one piece of work that has to be finished. So now that we take like, yeah, did I cover all the basics? Well, yeah, the purpose of Kanban is to visualize work and to create a flow of work that doesn't get interrupted. So like you always have something to work on. You just like output things through the process, and at the end you get what you like initially set out to do. So yeah, it introduces visualization. It has the stickers or like issues or tickets, like anything, like either digital tickets or physical stickers to attach to the board to show which like the progress of the work. And yeah, that's the very very basics of Kanban. As you can see, it's like not a lot. It's very simple. So after that, there are like intermediate level things that people who manage people who manage the workers, people who manage the work need to know and understand. First of all, is like if you just think about the concept of Kanban itself, the first thing you have to know is once you have a Kanban board, you probably have to like refer management to it if they want some kind of update or anything. You have to educate people around you that whenever you want an update, whenever you want something like regarding the work, go to the board. This is like the purpose of Kanban. One of the purposes of Kanban board is to unify people, to focus them on the work itself, not on talking to each other, not on like engaging in some kind of like management, micromanagement, but on the work itself. So whenever you have a manager who wants to go down to the field and ask people, you should, as a project manager or as somebody knowledgeable in this field, you should stop them and say, they have the Kanban board, so whenever you want an update, go to Kanban board. And probably in order to organize that, that's like the second level of this question. In order to organize that on the tickets on this issue, you might want to put like the name or like the team which is responsible for it, so that whenever anyone wants an update, they know exactly who to talk to. So that's point number one. Point number two is, because you have a bunch of people working on this stuff. Actually, let me put some stickers on it first so that it's become more visual. So issue, let's say number one, and we attach the sticker and to do. Now we have the backlog of things that to do. So some teams actually put the backlog and then to do, so that they know, okay, backlog is the things that we have to do in the work like itself, like in the ground scheme of things. But then to do is like, okay, this is ready to actually be started, and then blah blah blah. But again, it's up to the team, up to the people who actually do the work, and up to their project manager. So issue number two, and I'll put this issue in the progress. Let's say, yeah, in progress, and just number three. I'll put it in done. So now we get a little bit more visual. Yeah, it's becoming a little bit more visualized, a little bit more easy to understand. And of course, what you do in between is like you reattach stickers and put them in different stages once you finish them. So for example, from to do, you just pull things and pull them like, yeah, to in progress. Usually what would happen is you would prioritize issues in the first place in the beginning, or maybe not prioritize, but anyway, the things that got pulled from to do, they go on top. So they go on top, but of course, it's like, for example, issue number two got pulled the first, then issue number one gets the second place, and so on and so forth. So you don't really rearrange it, but digital tools allow you to rearrange according to priority. I don't think I would recommend that, because it's like a advanced level knowledge of Kanban. Because if you have prioritization of tasks, you lose the flow, and you start to prioritize tasks like, if you have a prioritization system which is like not based on people but on the system itself. So for example, if you prioritize people, like, let's huddle on issue one, let's make sure we put it through, that's actually good. That's actually good for Kanban. That's actually how Kanban is taught to be done. But if you have something like an automatic system which reassigns priorities based on the built-in functionality, then it's not going to work okay, because it would automatically reassign things, and you would lose focus, because people would be like, okay, where did that go? And they would be like, oh, it does mean that we have to work on this issue instead of this issue. But if you do it like with in coordination with the team, in coordination with the people who work, then of course it's going to introduce like focus, and it's going to introduce structure, and so on and so forth. So I recommend for anyone who is not like too knowledgeable in Kanban, don't rearrange the stickers, don't meddle with the board too much, just let it go, let it flow the way it is. Because people like doing the work, they're used to seeing this board more than anyone else, and they know exactly what they need to complete. So once they complete issue number two, it goes to the next stage, and you can stay with issue number one in this place. You don't have to pull it up or anything, so that people like visually they can understand, okay, there used to be issue number two here, and now issue number two is done. Okay, that's good, we're actually making progress. And issue number one, okay, that's good, like, it's now the top priority because it's like highest on the list. So that's like level two knowledge of how to do Kanban. Very basic stuff, but also people tend to forget it in the like in the process of doing things. So once you focus people, once you make them go to the board and actually focus on some stuff. Oh, now that I see the board closer, it's actually very ugly. Let me just redraw it once again. It's very ugly. Okay. Like something like this. Okay, that looks a little bit better, but still ugly. Yep. Hi, Waduni. Thanks for coming. So yeah, let's continue from where I stopped. Yes. So once you have Kanban board arranged like this, once you can focus people, once you can like have a conversation with them, then comes the difficult stuff, like the advanced level stuff, where you actually have to like do some advanced level project management on people and tell them how to organize their work, because once you have the process, you will encounter some problems in like along the way. So this is where advanced, a little bit like upper intermediate, I would say not advanced, upper intermediate level of Kanban starts. So like the basic and intermediate level, they're really easy to do. They're like, okay, you just have a board. Again, just restating, you just have a board, you have a flow, you have a team, you have some stickers, you have some like on the board, you have some statuses, some like to do in progress done, or maybe some other statuses. And intermediate level is okay. You already have the basic stuff, and now you have to refer anyone who wants a progress update or some kind of like update regarding the work. You have to refer them back to the board, say this is everything we have. This is all the documentation we have. Of course, there might be some other documentation systems like internally for software development, for example, you can like do documentation, but everything regarding work in progress right now, that's on Kanban board, so that people don't get like too distracted with other things. So that management, for example, doesn't come to the workers in the field and say, what are you doing? What are you working on right now? Kanban introduces kind of like self management in a way, like any other project methodology, good project methodology. It introduces self management to the team. So, yeah, by doing this. And yeah, and don't like try to rearrange things, just let it flow naturally. Just let the people who manage the job like do the management of the issues, because people, like if you lose a sticker or if you reprioritize it, people will lose focus, and focus is one of the main points of Kanban. Because again, like Kanban focuses on putting things through. It's like a meat grinder. So once you lose focus, you stop putting things through the process. You stop outputting things. So you have to focus on something, then put it through the process, and then blah blah blah, and then next. So for example, if you go from to do in progress done, that's it. Like it's out. To do in progress done, that's out. To do in progress done. So that's how you should do Kanban. Yeah, now the upper intermediate stuff. Once you have a Kanban board, people will inevitably get a little bit confused about what's going on, and they will need some kind of meeting, some kind of like structure on how to with the purpose to organize their work and with the purpose to actually focus on some things. So this meeting can take different forms, but usually I saw companies try to have a meeting for like an hour or something and talk about everything on the board, which is totally unnecessary. The meeting, I think, in my opinion, should be something like a stand-up meeting from Extreme Programming, or like daily Scrum from Scrum, which is actually like daily stand-up from Extreme Programming. So it's like one and the same. So you basically have, because it's a physical board, you like it's really good to really stand up right next to it or in front of it, and only the people who actually do the job, actually do the work, are mandatory to have in front of the board, and talk about what's going on, talk about the work. Why do you have to do this? Because sometimes you have to update the issues. So like for example, issue number one, and we have an update. So of course, like to do that, people who do the work, they have to have some kind of space to talk about it, especially if it's like a kind of work that requires collaboration and cooperation with other people. Definitely you have to have some kind of time box for people to talk, to huddle, and to update things that are necessary. Also, you can use a Kanban with Scrum, which is called Scrumban, a very neat name. So Scrumban introduces both practices from Kanban and Scrum, of course, introduces practices like backlog refinement, where you can do refinement of the board, of the all the things on the board, and just talk about them, like a product owner or a developer or a senior developer or both of them, or like any composition that you see fit, can come in and like change all the things and say like update or maybe split them. Sometimes you can split the ticket into two if it's too big, for example, and output the first part and then focus on the second part. So anyway, like you can combine Kanban with different methodologies. It's just a tool. Like it's not really a methodology unless you go to really advanced level. If you're a Kanban master, or like I don't know what they call it exactly, but if you're not like a certified Kanban master, you probably just use it as a another tool, a visual tool for other methodologies. But if you are really deep, like neck deep into Kanban, then of course you start to treat and see it as a methodology. That's like up to advanced level, like really advanced level. So we're not there yet at this point. But yeah, upper intermediate level, let me just clarify. So once the first point is, the first one, actually, let me, like from intermediate level, actually, let me make some notes. So the first point is, um, what did I say? The first point is meeting or some kind of like time box, just to to huddle together and focus on something, and maybe update something. So you have to have some kind of meeting. It shouldn't be too long, of course. It shouldn't involve management. It shouldn't it's advised to not involve management, because management would, maybe you could involve management if they're knowledgeable, but usually it's not really mandatory to involve management, and people don't like to talk about things like openly and freely when they have to involve management. So yeah, it shouldn't be too long. It shouldn't involve unnecessary people. That's the point number one, meeting. Point number two is you have to focus. Focus. It's I already mentioned it in the intermediate level, of course, like you have to focus, but in the upper intermediate, the focus becomes really important, because once you have, for example, 5 or 6 stickers here, like when it becomes really different to really difficult to manage the things when you forget what kind of work are we actually doing. Then it becomes really messy, because people also lose focus. They start to prioritize everything. They start to run around like headless chickens, and they don't know what to do. So at this moment, you have to step in as a project manager, as a leader, as someone knowledgeable, and say, okay, let's focus on things. Let's focus on number one. Let's focus on number two. And maybe you can rearrange the stickers to make sure that people like have to see like visually what they need to focus on. And yeah, focus is the second thing. The third thing is related to focus. It's actually a tool that helps you focus on things automatically. So if you cannot manage the work in the field, like focus on things on as you go, you have to focus on things, like you have to introduce some focus beforehand, right? So if you're not, for example, in there, if you're not managing the team directly every day, every week, then one tool which is a really good tool, which you can still use if you even manage the team hands on, it's called whip limits. So whip li- uh, whip limit. So whip limit is a work in progress limit. What is a work in progress limit? You basically set a limit in digital, like tools like Trello and Jira. You can set a limit automatically in the board itself, so that's oh yeah, so that's you don't exceed the limits automatically, like basically built-in limitation. But on a physical board, you can basically like draw a line and say, okay, this is where we stop. Like this, for this column is where we stop. We don't work on anything beyond that point, even if it's really important. Because of course management would say like, why do you not work on anything, like everything at the same time? And I totally understand their sentiment, but also I totally say like, screw that sentiment. We don't care, because when people cannot work and focus on two most important things, they cannot focus on any of them. Like they cannot work on like all of them at the same time, because if they are not able to finish the two things that are at the top, then obviously they are not able to finish all the five things, right? All the several things. So once you introduce the whip limit, what it does is you only work on things that don't cross this line. So 2 issues, 3 issues, 4 issues, wherever you want, but you have to fine tune it with the team. Like you have to see how they work to actually get a feel of it. But a good rule of thumb is divided by two. So for example, if it's like the team size is 10, a good whip limit is 5. maybe even four. So always downplay it a little bit. So like 10 people cannot work on 10 different things and do them correctly. They have to collaborate. They have to like, you have a team because basically all of them are, like they work as a team. So you have to take more, or you have to take less than there are people. So yeah, if there are four people, good whip limit would be like one or two tasks, and so on and so forth. So 50 or less percent of the team size, that's your whip limit. Of course, there's not like set restriction, but from my experience, I think that's what works and what's generally accepted among people. I've seen a whip limit of 5 issues a lot. It's very helpful to focus the team. It's very helpful to organize some kind of like discussion around things. So what does it do as well to the team? Like we understand from the point of view of the team regarding management, we don't want like over management or micromanagement, like, or some kind of like scope creep. That's why we introduce whip limit. But from the perspective of the workers themselves, how does it work? Whip limit introduces focus, because if you have something you have to work on as a member of the team, and you just cannot put your sticker inside this, like, because you obviously like would be going against the very rule of whip limit, you as a team member, you will naturally like go and ask people like, how can I help? Guys, let's put it through. And it introduces additional like pressure. It's like creating an artificial bottleneck, but this bottleneck also like serves the purpose of the bottleneck itself. It focuses people on one single point of pressure. So once the pressure applies, people who were originally either slacking or not understanding how to do some things, or like having other issues, they would be naturally pushed by the like the whip limit, the work itself, and other people like their colleagues to do that, to complete that. And that is the essence of Kanban. It introduces like flow. It introduces natural bottlenecks. It introduces some other like hurdles on the way, just that so that you could have a flow. So essentially, if I were to visualize Kanban, it's like having like a bottle, like a huge bottle here, a huge stream of things. Like you have in a meat grinder, like you have a funnel, right? So it's working like a funnel. You have a huge like inflow of things, and you introduce some kind of bottlenecks along the way, so that those things actually get processed. Like in a meat grinder too, you can throw as much meat as you want, but the meat grinder is only going to process what it can process. So you cannot throw like a couple tons and expect all the couple tons to be processed. It's going to process them eventually, but like little by little, just as as it works. So this is the whip limit and how it works. This is like upper intermediate level of knowledge. Usually people who don't reduce whip limit, they work on all of this stuff all together. So they work on all of it, and you can see it from their boards. And I've seen it a lot from my practice. Is you see basically a bunch of issues in one column and nothing moves to the second column, or you see like a bunch of columns which are filled but they don't really move along the way. So yeah, that's a whip limit. The fourth thing I would say is don't introduce anything like an expedite line. Like as soon as you introduce an expedite line, people are just going to abuse the hell out of it. So what do I mean by expedite line? Well, if you don't know what expedite line is, you are a lucky person, because then it means you haven't worked for a company which is like using Kanban and full of crap. What an expedite line means is, probably there was some manager, probably there was some stakeholder or someone else who said, I want my stuff done, you know, faster than the rest. Or maybe it was internally like, let's make an expedited line which will make sure that things are in this line, in this lane. It's called expedite lane actually. Hearing it for the first time, yeah, it means you're a bit like luckier than me. So expedite lane is like a lane of things that, oh, like once a sticker goes there, once an issue goes there, yeah, we focus on this one. And that's usually introduced by management or by stakeholders, because if people start introducing that in their own board, they're just out of their minds. So essentially what it does is, these things, like this thing here in the expert lane, is more prioritized than this. Like we only work on this one. And that introduces, of course, logically thinking. It introduces a lot of like not confusion, it actually introduces focus, but on the things that get to this lane. Sometimes it can be in short term helpful, but after that what happens is people try to squeeze in everything from this usual lane into the expedite lane, and you get a massive conflict in the team, because people are like, okay, so this is an expedite lane, but this is what we actually have to do. So like, why do we have expedite lane in the first place? And some people would be defining like defending expedite lane and stuff like that. So fourth is no, like let's call it expedite lane XL, expedite lane, no XL, no expedite lane. And after this, basically there are a lot of anti-patterns that you can see in Kanban, and but the good thing about all of the anti-patterns is you can visually see them. So everything that looks kind of like different from this state of things, so once you have this state of things, it looks okay. Everything that doesn't look like this is probably not right. So for example, if there is nothing in to do, if there is nothing in to do, yeah, Igor, you missed the no expedite lane explanation. I'm going to quickly like quickly go over it. Expedite lane means like somebody introduced a lane of things that need to be prioritized. You don't have to, you must not do that, because then it creates conflict. It creates a lot of like stress, because people would just be trying to squeeze in everything in this expedite lane. I like yeah, it looks like this usually in the digital tools, and in the like physical tools, they all look the same. They look like this lane of things that need to be prioritized. So once we introduce it, let's say, yeah, you introduce it in your team. Oh. Then be ready for a lot of conflict and a lot of infighting. So that was number four. And number three is number five. Number five is whenever you see something that doesn't look like this, so you have something in to do, or ideally it would look like this, like you have several things in to do. I'm sorry, I cannot put it here, but usually it would go down there. Like, let's put it here. You have several things in to do, you have several things in progress, and you have several things in done. If you don't have anything like this, or for example, like if you start work, it can look like this, yeah, without done, if you just started work. But if you don't have anything like this resembling this structure, you have some problem, you have some problem in your flow that you have to resolve. So why, let me explain like one by one. For example, if there is nothing in to do and everything is in progress, it means that somebody is not like the team does not have, like, if we continue the analogy with the meat grinder, the team does not have the meat to grind. That means that, it's a little bit like, yeah, like, why do we not have any work to do? It means that either no work comes into the system, which is pretty much impossible, or somebody is not doing their job of putting the things, like either a product owner or a team manager or whatever, like they're not putting the good work into, organizing the work itself. So like making sure that we always have something to work on. That's the first and the most important anti-pattern, because once you don't have the things to work on, you don't have the flow. The flow gets interrupted. You have some stale time, which is like not good. But if, for example, if you work on so many things and you just one by one add things to do, that's okay. That's okay. It just means that you're not like, you're faster than whoever is giving you the job. You're faster than that. Yeah, work never finishes. Yeah, exactly. So that's an anti-pattern, obviously. If you have nothing in progress, that's an anti-pattern. Your people are not doing the job. If you have everything in to do and nothing in progress, like that's an anti-pattern, obviously. If you have nothing in done, well, yeah, if there was enough time to finish something, like for example, like 1 week, or 2 weeks, or like regular, cadence. If you don't finish anything in regular cadence, then it's a problem. That means also you have some problem internally. And another anti-pattern is everything in one column, either like in any column. That's an anti-pattern, because usually what happens is you have everything in progress, or everything in quality check. That means that people like who are responsible for this part of the work, like quality check, or actually doing the work, or any other, or creating the work, they're not doing their job too. So that needs direct intervention, because people are always focused on the work, and they're not really focused on managing the work. So at that time, somebody knowledgeable about Kanban, or maybe like a team member knowledgeable about Kanban, they should intervene, and they should say, guys, we're not doing everything correctly, because we have a problem here, and that's an anti-pattern. Yeah. So fifth, in the upper intermediate section, the fifth point is, how do I put it? Anti-patterns. Anti-pattern. Anti-pattern. So you have to be able to spot anti-patterns. That's, I think, it for upper intermediate level. Now we will go to advanced level. Advanced level is where the real knowledge of Kanban really starts. Um, I'm just going through my head, like trying to remember if I forgot anything about upper intermediate level. Oh. Yeah, it doesn't seem like I forgot anything. Yeah, advanced level is where the real knowledge of Kanban starts, because here you have Kanban masters and people who actually manage Kanban day to day, and have a lot of like tools, a lot of additional knowledge on top of like the basic knowledge that I gave you right now, the basic and upper intermediate knowledge that I gave you right now. So those people are actually Kanban masters. What they do is they measure the flow. They measure the flow, and they use a bunch of like things like flow metrics. For example, Daniel's Vacanti book, When Will It Be Done? It's a wonderful book by Daniel Vacanti. It's a book that describes flow metrics and how to do them correctly. What flow metrics is? Well, once you introduce the flow in Kanban, obviously you're going to have some data. So for example, like in done, you're going to have some things that you've done. And yeah, and the flow metrics is the first like advanced level. Oh, the first thing you're going to pay attention to is flow metric. Why do you need that? Well, when management comes up to you and says, when is something going to be done, of course you're going to have some answer, right, for them. If you're an advanced Kanban master who is actually responsible for the team, like a team manager or like a senior member of the team, at that time, the problem is, how do I measure how many things we've done if we've never measured it? Number A, or number B, like point B. How do I measure things if we measured them, but we only measured them by like the sheer quantity? So, for example, if I didn't measure anything, I don't know how many things we can output, obviously. But if I still measured things, like for example, now I know that two things are done and four things are in progress and one thing isn't to do. What does it tell me? It doesn't tell me anything, right? Because I can talk to management and say, we did like two things. In what time frame? Like how fast? Did we have any problems? How many problems did we have? Of course, management and stakeholders, they're not going to be happy about this. So flow metrics, what it introduces is you cannot stop the flow, and you should not stop the flow. um and But what you can introduce is kind of like time frames. So for example, if we have this line here, let's imagine like this line is not here. Let's imagine, yeah, let's imagine the time flow. I hope it's visible. Time flow. Yeah, we introduce some kind of time boxes, like either 1 day or 1 week, depending on how your work proceeds. I recommend 1 week is a really good way of measuring things, and probably there is no team in the world, like functional team in the world, that cannot output anything in 1 week. There is always like something you did in 1 week. If you didn't do anything in 1 week, you should probably like divide those tickets, like split them into some smaller parts, because at least one part of the ticket was completed in 1 week. That's like impossible to not complete anything. So 1 week is a good time frame, especially because at the end of 1 week you can introduce like scrum practices, when you talk to the team and like give retrospective, give feedback to each other, or have some kind of like meeting with senior like managers or stakeholders, and blah blah blah. So 1 week is a good time frame. And 2 week, I would say, for Kanban is not really essential, because as long as you have flow and cadence, 1 week is like just perfect for that. So you can also introduce like 2 days or 3 days if it's a very like fast paced job, or if the work is not too difficult to manage. You can introduce 2 or 3 days, but that becomes like difficult to manage and naturally remember. So it's kind of like going from decimal to to binary system and trying to measure everything in binary. So flow metric essentially is you measure how many things you output, and this is called throughput. Like it's output or throughput. You can call them both, but the official Daniel Vacanti metric is throughput. So throughput, once you measure it, is just basically like your number of things that you have done in a certain period of time. So throughput is number one. Um, how do I? Yeah, actually, let me just write it here. Throughput. Sorry for my handwriting if it's like not really readable. It's difficult to write it that way. So throughput. Once you have throughput, the second thing, I mean, then we can't actually rearrange them in the order of the first thing is not like throughput, but I think that throughput is like the easiest to achieve. The second thing that you have to measure is work in progress right now. So how many things are in the state of in progress right now? That's a very simple metric too. So throughput is like here, work in progress is here, and of course work in progress should also be time limited. So like work in progress will whip either today or in a week, like so either on a certain day or in a week. What it does is there is like some math behind it. Like Daniel Vacanti literally created some like formula. I don't remember them by heart, but I kind of like remember the essence. The essence is you have to measure throughput, work in progress, work in progress, and what else? Throughput, work in progress, and cycle time. So as long as you have these three metrics about your work, and I recommend to use them like even in other types of methodologies like Scrum and blah blah blah. As long as you have these three metrics, you can basically see the progress of your work. What like explained the throughput. What is work in progress? Work in progress essentially is, yeah, I explained it too. It's like repeating myself. It's just like how many things you're working right now currently at the stage. Yeah, you're working probably like is better to measure them day by day, because then you can see work in progress like kind of graph. You can see the progression of work in progress if you actually finish things that you set out to do, on if or if you're just taking more and more and more work every day. Ideally it should be like perfectly aligned, like perfectly straight line. Ideally it should be like we work on five things today, work on five things but different things tomorrow, and we work on five things the day after that, but again different things. Of course it doesn't mean, for example, if you have five things every single day, it doesn't mean essentially that you're necessarily that you're good at your job. It means that maybe there are only five things that people are working on right now and they're stuck with the same five things, so you should check that too. So work in progress is that cycle time is essentially how much time. It's one of the most important metrics in all of project management. Is how much time, how many days, hours, blah blah blah, does it take for us to finish a certain piece of work that's coming into the system. So why is it important? Well, actually, that relates to the second point. The second point is service level expectations. So service level expectation is actually, let me explain service level expectation, then you will understand cycle time. So in order to put the meat in the grinder, again with the analogy, you have to kind of like cut it in some kind of shape and size that will fit in the meat grinder. You cannot just put a slab of meat of 20 kilograms into the grinder, which is like small enough to fit 100 grams max, and expect it to be grinded, right? So what it means for work in this analogy is that you have to make sure that everything that comes into your to do into your system is small enough for you to actually finish it in 1 week or whatever like time limit you set. but usually it's 1 week or even 1 day. So Daniel Vacanti recommends it to be 1 week, or yeah, one working week and no more. So if you can finish one thing in one working week, that's barely, passing as service level expectation. So service level expectation is the number, like the relative size, is basically like the principle of putting, like creating something, like creating a ticket, creating a sticker which is small enough for you to put it through the system. So service level expectation usually would be 1 week. Yeah, basically like it's 1 week, and anything below 1 week in terms of relative difficulty, that's your under service level expectation good, task to do. So once you have everything aligned under service level expectation, you can set it as much as you want. So, for example, you can set it to 3 days and then tell people SLE is 3 days. So make sure that everything you put here is like will takes us, shorter than 3 days to complete, or around 3 days to complete. Otherwise, you can like, for example, if something is like too big in your opinion, you can lower down service level expectation to 2 days and ask people to align with the 2 days SLE. So what it introduces is people will start to understand how big a task should be, so that when they create the tickets, when they self manage and like put the job into the into the funnel, they will understand naturally that, okay, this is too big, I have to cut it down. Dmitry or Ovaduni or Igor will ask me to cut it down, so I should probably cut it down. I should probably divide it into several tickets myself before it actually happens. So this introduces like discipline. This introduces good ethic, good working ethic to the people in the field. And this also introduces like really manageable pieces of work. So once everything is under SLE, then you can measure cycle time, because once the pieces are manageable, the pieces of work are manageable, and they are able to go through the meat grinder, then you can measure how much time does it take for the meat grinder to process it. So again, with the analogy, if you put a piece of meat and it's like taking too long for the meat grinder to process it, then you naturally start to think, is the piece of meat too big? Is it still like too dense? Is it still like, does it have a bone inside? Or does the meat grinder malfunction? What is going on? So that's where you have to measure the cycle time. You have to have this feeling that if something is stuck there for too long, it's not okay. It's not okay. Like, it's either too big and we messed up with aligning with the SLE, or the whole system, the whole process is not working the way it's supposed to work. So this level, if you measure cycle time, you will have this information, you will have this feeling. But if you don't measure cycle time on each sticker, so how do I measure it? For example, in Jira, I basically take the start time and the end date and the start date, and I subtract them. I just see the cycle and add +1. Actually, that's Daniel Vacanti. That's how Daniel Vacanti manages cycle time too. Uh, like, take the end date, take the start date, you subtract them and add +1. Why do you add +1? Is because, well, the end dates minus the start date for some reason gives you like less dates. For example, 25 minus 22 gives you like 3, right? But essentially you work 25, 23, 24, and 25, or 22, 23, 24, and 25. So you worked 4 days. That's why you have to add +1. Or in some cases, of course, if it was created on the evening of 22nd, then it's like 3 days, in total. But if you do it this way, it's pretty much bulletproof. It's fireproof. You will always have more or less certain number of how many days it took. So essentially, yeah, like once you have something in your system, which is in this physical board, like the sticker, you just put the start date, for example, 25, just like this, 25, and then the end date is 28. You subtract them and add +1, and you get 4. So this is your cycle time for this specific task. If it takes more than your SLE, then you can pay attention to it and say like, why did it take so long and stuff like that, and you can initiate the conversation. But naturally, once it takes less than a week, people usually don't care. They're like chill about it. But if you really want to go deep, and if you really have a feeling that it's taking too long, for example, if your SLE is 1 day and it's taking 4, obviously that's not fine to have something to take 4 times the SLE. So yeah, once you have the cycle time, why does it matter? Is because uh well, no, actually, it matters just because it's like you have to output things in a certain period of time, right? How to measure cycle time along the way is number three. Number three is very simple method. It's called item aging. Item aging. Item aging. So item aging is once you have like the ticket. Some people actually went as far as to attach like a banana, cover to the ticket, and like see if the banana cover gets dark by the end of the ticket. So they take the banana cover, they like attach it here, and then once it goes through the system, if by the end of it is like black, then if it's dark, the system is not working well enough, not working fast enough. So some people went even as far as that. I don't recommend this method because it's like highly not hygienic and not really pleasant to look at. But what people do is they just put like dashes. So one dash for one day, two dash for the second day, three dash for the third day, four, and then five. So why do they do that? Is because it's easier to manage the cycle time by this, like not by the start date and the end date, but because in digital space we cannot really like put dashes or anything, or bother people with comments. What I decided is to subtract the dates and add plus one. That's that dynamic content based success is okay too. But like item agent also introduces the same thing, the same metric cycle time, but in a different, like more engaging format. So for example, like it introduces conversations between people. Once you have like more than SLE days, you can start a conversation. You're like, guys, like it already has four dashes. It's already been 4 days. What's going on? Are we doing well? Does anyone need help? And blah blah blah. So it introduces kind of visualization of how long did it take for you to complete the job. That's wonderful. Yeah. Other than that, item agent SLE. Well, the fourth and the final point I think in this one is very high level thing. It's Monte Carlo simulation. So Monte Carlo simulation, I talked about it in the previous session about Scrum. Essentially, once you have all the cycle times and everything, you can put all the issues in some kind of table, like manage the table. It will require some kind of digital, like digital tool, like Excel, yeah, or Google Sheets. So you will need some kind of Excel sheet to do that. You put all the items you completed and their codes. For example, this is AC1 and AC2, blah blah blah, and um in the next column you attach, like you add their cycle times: 4, 3, 2, 5, blah 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 blah. Once you have 10,000, no, actually, I'm sorry, not 10,000. Once you have several of those things, like enough data to make some conclusions, for example, 1, 2, 3, several weeks of data of how much time did it take, how many days did it take for a certain thing to be completed, you can plot this cycle times. You can put them into a randomizer, and you can output 10,000 random numbers out of this array of numbers. So it should be like bigger. It should be bigger than, ideally, than 1 week. It should be like 2, 3, 4 weeks, like so that you have enough numbers, so that you have enough statistical information on how long does it take to complete things. And once you run 10,000 simulations of based on this number, or 1,000 simulations, or it should be a big number like 5,000, somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000, like just in every cell you just put like a random number out of this array of cycle times. You will have kind of like a bell graph, like a bell chart of regular time, like the most expected time, the most probable time of you to complete something. So for example, this is like 3 days mark. So once you have this bell chart, you will understand where you stand, like in terms of cycle time. So you will understand that the most expected that you can finish is not actually three that you thought originally. It's not the average, but it's like four. So it takes a bit longer. The other method to use the same exact Monte Carlo simulation, it's written as Montecarlo, Monte Carlo. The other method is again like plotting this bell curve, but using the throughput in the sprint in a certain timeline. So for example, if you have 1 week and you output several things, like let's say two, you just record it as week one, two, and then week two you output three, and then week three you output, let's say again, two things. So once you have several weeks of this, or maybe days, you can actually cut, like if you're able to put through some things in 1 day, you can measure it by day. But generally, like once you have several weeks of this data, let's say 8 weeks, like 2 months or 3 months of this data, you can again plot them. You can again like put them in the right randomizer, sorry, a randomizer, and simulate 10,000 of your weeks. And once you simulate 10,000 of your weeks, you again will have some kind of like bell curve distribution, in which you will see that this point again is, more expected out of your team to finish in 1 week. Why does it matter to, always put them into randomizer and do this? Because if you put everything in average, you're not counting the median. So the median is, people who are familiar with mathematics, they know that the median is the most frequently met value. So for example, if you have 2, 14, 3, 2, 15, 2, 1. The median is 2. The median value is 2. You are more expected to encounter 2 in this set of values rather than 14 and 15 and 3. But what the average, the flaw of averages, actually 5 is the flaw of averages, I would say. Flaw of averages. So the flaw of averages is, once you start calculating the average, 1 plus 2 is 5, 20, 34, 37, 39 divided by 7, 39 divided by 7, 5.4, right? 5.4. So once you divide, like, do the average, is 5.4, but we know actually that it's 2. It's more likely to have 2, like to encounter 2 in this set of numbers. So the flaw of averages is, if we were to consider this, for example, as the deadlines, like the cycle time for a certain thing to be completed, we would, like for our next prediction, we would bet on either the average or the median or the more, like any other kind of number. So if you were to bet, would you place your bet on again meeting the 15, like disregarding this number? Let's say this number is not 15, but like it's just there, like a range that it kind of like prompts you to think that this is going to be 15. But if we just consider it as like a consecutive, performance, like day by day by day by day, so the next bet on your team should not be 15, because 15 is like only met once, or 14 is only met like two times out of one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 days of your performance. So if you were like, if the management was to approach you and say, okay, how many days, how many things can we output in this week, how, like, what do you think? Would you say 5.4, or would you say 2? I would say 2. I would probably say 2, because like 2 or 3, because it's like the most, widely met number of things that we can output. So I would say, yeah, probably 2 or 3, maybe like up to 5, but no more than that. Um like, yeah, and that would probably be right, or maybe I would be wrong in these cases. But okay, let me actually illustrate a more drastic number. So for example, let's say something happened and we got, like in our company, we got a really bad day. Like we were outputting like 30 things, then 29 things, then 28 things. And there was one day when nobody could do work, and then it's like zero. And then it's like, oh, we back to work. We again do 30, we again do 29, blah blah blah. Of course, for the next prediction, like if we take the averages, that would really skew our averages. Like that would really make it difficult to, rely on the averages. So of course we would say somewhere between 20, 28 and 30 we will get this number, but the average is would be 30 plus 30, let's say 5 times 30, 150 divided by 6, it actually would be 25. So the average is about 25 or lower than 25 because of this 1 0 number when we didn't work, when we couldn't output things. And if we rely on the averages, that would be 25. So of course, this is much more accurate for the management than 25, right? So we want to rely on the more accurate number. What Monte Carlo simulation does essentially is takes your output of things like your throughput, and makes sure that all the outliers are not really that influential on your average. So it runs out of the things that you put in the randomizer for like if you create the array of your throughputs in a week, if you create an array, it takes your data that you already have, 3 and let's say 14 here. Yeah, it takes your data and it multiplies it by 10,000, so it creates a simulation when all of this is kind of like run 10,000 times so that you see the real picture and not just the average. So the real picture is somewhere like between 2 and 3, and the averages of course is not the same. So if you want to build this, it's actually not that difficult to build, and if you google it in the internet, there are some templates. I found one template once. Or if you want to ask me for a template, you can ask me for a template. I have two, both in Google Sheet and in Excel. Essentially, what it does is, yeah, once you have the throughput, once you measure it, it will create the simulation, and then boom, done. You can expect how many things are going to be completed in the next time frame that you choose, like 1 week or 2 weeks, on whatever. So those are the most advanced things that you need to know about Kanban. What are the other things? Well, I think maybe swim lane. Swim lane is another thing, like the last thing for Kanban. Swim. I'll just write swim. So swim lane. Some people do it to, like separate the work. It's really advanced because usually people who use Kanban use it very, internally, and they use it for only one team. But people who want to use it for several teams, yeah, I'm going to erase it. So if you wanted to make some notes, just make sure you make some notes. So if you work with several teams who are engaged in different types of work but are managed somehow in the same job, in the same board, for example, that happens a lot in Jira. It happens a lot in Trello, in digital tools when you have a lot of people working in the same board. What you introduce is, along with the whip limits, of course, they don't go anywhere. You can introduce swim lanes. So a swim lane is basically a team. So this is one team's swim lane. They only manage their job here. They only manage their work here. This is another team's swim lane. This team does not put their tickets in there. This team only works in this swim lane. So I don't really think it's mandatory to have a swim lane. Usually, if people are collaborative enough, if they can collaborate with each other, if they know how to do their work, they don't really need swim lanes. But sometimes teams really just like for the aesthetics of it, or for having different measurements and stuff, for introducing some kind of segregation, some kind of clarity. They can ask you as a project manager to introduce swim lanes, which is totally fine. You can introduce them, and in that way, the only downside is if it's a physical board, you can't really go beyond this space. So you will have to make sure that your flow is immaculate. Your flow has to be nearly perfect for this to not overflow. But if it does overflow, then it's going to be problematic, of course. Like just by the visuals of it, is going to be a little bit messy. But at the same time, it will show you that some things are not correct. Some things are not working with this team. So there are pluses, like there are upsides and downsides to using swim lanes. I personally think that if a team is collaborative enough, they don't really need a swim lane. But if they want a swim lane, then why not? It will introduce like some clarity, and some Kanban masters they actually recommend using swim lanes. I'm saying that if you're knowledgeable enough in the metrics, and if you're just knowledgeable enough in like how teams work and collaborate, then you don't really need swim lanes. So I think that's it for today and for Kanban. I highly recommend works of Daniel Vacanti, especially works like When Will It Be Done, and actionable agile metrics for project management. They are wonderful. They're essentially one and the same. So if you read one of them, you don't need to read the other one. And basically, like Daniel Vacanti's work on Kanban is really impeccable. It explains a lot about Kanban and the logic of it and how it works. And he really treats Kanban as a separate methodology. And I agree with him. Kanban in depth, on a deep level, is actually a separate methodology in and of itself. It just doesn't. It's just so visual that it can be used with other methodologies too. But if you dig deep enough, you can settle with Kanban and not use any other methodology. It actually has elements of lean inside of it, because lean is also getting rid of other, unnecessary elements, and Kanban naturally introduces it by showing you that some stickers are just, taking too long. It's like they're never going to be complete, or some processes are redundant, because if you have one column of things like quality check that continuously keeps being skipped, and your quality doesn't fall, of course it warrants some kind of like conclusion that quality check is not really necessary. So it happens a lot. Actually, it happens a lot with, for example, we had a Kanban board with, like in my previous company, where my and other project managers stage was marked as project manager QC, but it got skipped so many times that we just deleted it. We were like, we don't need to QC that, because it doesn't affect the quality. So our management, of course, was not really affirmative of this, but we just quietly did that, and they never even realized we're not doing that anymore. So Kanban introduces you to like actually visually seeing if you're not having something, something going well. And it's very logical, yeah, because if our stage with other project manager was continuously skipped and nothing changed, it's like lean, basic lean practice, like just eliminate it. Like we don't need it anymore. What else? Yeah, I think that Scrum and Kanban is a really good combination, and that's why it got recognition as almost a separate combination, almost a separate methodology. Scrum Ban. Lean Kanban is also good because with Kanban, Lean works perfectly well. It's again, as I mentioned before, it introduces visualization. It shows you when something is not going right. Other than that, Kanban and XP are working well too, because XP introduces, its focuses on collaboration of people, on making them better, and Kanban kind of like it can include all of this even as tickets. By the way, yeah, the way to manage the tickets in Kanban is, if you like, people might be confused, people might be concerned about how do they introduce something like recurring, or maybe some bug. So there was something like a task which was thought to be completed but it was bugged, so how do we go about this? I say, if it was done and if it was bugged, well, it goes back to do, it's not really done, that's it. Like, just don't overthink it, just put the sticker back and pull it back and say, yep, maybe change something on it, maybe change something on it. They could say, okay, this is not actually like creating this job, so that nobody gets confused, but it's not creating something, but it's like checking something. But essentially, if it's like a type of work which is under service level expectations, which is under 1 week or whatever time limit you set, it deserves a place on the board in and of itself. So that's why it's totally fine to just pull it back and put it into do, and measure it as your like through your throughput and blah blah blah. Because imagine, like, again with the meat grinder analogy, if you put a piece of meat in the meat grinder and comes out unscathed, untouched on the other side, what do? You put it back in, right? You don't go in any creative way about it. You just like, oh, how did you survive? Okay, you put it back in. That's what you do with Kanban. Treat it as a meat grinder. Like, you have a bunch of meat that needs to be grinded, and you just put it in Kanban. People also are concerned about, like, how do we in Kanban introduce collaboration stuff. Man, just combine it with Scrum. That's totally fine to combine it with Scrum, to borrow some other people's methodologies, some other methodologies, like practices. It's totally fine. Just introduce some retrospective sessions, some review session if you want. Invite some stakeholders, some managers, do some refinements. So, for example, if you have too many tickets, like, assign somebody from the team who is knowledgeable of work, like a team leader or yourself, or like a senior developer or whatever, and let them check those things. Just make sure that those things are, in, like, this thing, for example. Oh, that's not it anymore. Yeah, just tear it apart. That's it. Done. We don't need it anymore. Throw it away. So yeah, that's the gist about Kanban. Yeah. Ask the questions. Yeah, let's switch to the questions now. Nice. Thank you. Would you like to voice your questions or just write them here and for me to read? Actually, you wrote them, so I'm just going to read them out. Are there ways to track dependencies effectively when working with multiple teams across different projects? Yes, there are ways to track dependencies with the swim lanes. That's why many people actually ask for swim lanes. Well, they want to track dependencies. They want to combine the tickets, or maybe like in digital tools, you can actually assign dependencies, something like blocked by something. But Kanban originally, because it was manufacturing, I treat it as a supplementary tool. I treat it as something that can be used with in coordination with other tools. Because, well, for example, in Scrum, I'm going to illustrate it from the point perspective of Scrum. In Scrum, we have a definition of done, right? Definition of done is a list, like a checklist of things that we need to ensure the quality. Usually, when you want to introduce some kind of collaboration in Scrum, you introduce a common definition of done for all of them. So, for example, there are several teams, like two or three teams working together. You make a definition of done for anything, including all of their checklists. So, for example, right now I'm working as a project manager for Louis Vuitton. There are teams, there are vendors that I work with, and those vendors have a separate checklist. So, for example, for them, it's essential to make sure that only the hardware is installed. And for me, it's essential to make sure that the software is installed too. The software is working well. So this guy, of course, he's knowledgeable about software, but he's not, he doesn't need to go out of his way to make sure that something works from my side, because not all of the systems are his direct responsibility, right? So what I did was just include this in my checklist and ask him to include it in his checklist to check a certain software, which caused a little bit of conflict recently with the recent project. And he said, yeah, I'll do it from now on. So, like, that's how you do it in Scrum too. You have a definition of done. So essentially, I kind of, like, without calling it a definition of done, I had a definition of done, like a checklist. And that's how you do it in Scrum. In Kanban, you can import the same practice on the ticket, like make the definition of done. Or if you have a physical board, write it on the side of the board, definition of done. And this will focus people on what's necessary to complete for a certain piece of work. But I think personally that Kanban, like in pure format, in its pure form, it introduces collaboration when you gather the team around the board and you focus on things, and you say, like, why is it not done yet? Or you say, like, how can we collaborate so that we can do it, so that we make sure that it's done and it's high quality and everything. So at this level, Kanban introduces collaboration. Apart from this, I think it's difficult. Like, it doesn't prescribe you to, so two methods: definition of done or collaboration, like a meeting. Apart from this, it's difficult to facilitate collaboration because usually people would just come to the board in, like, any time of day and just, like, change something that they did. And sometimes, because you have different teams working on the same stuff, it's like, why did somebody, you cannot wait for somebody to finish it to move it to the next stage, in which case you would have to divide it into several stages and actually allow people to assign other people to this ticket. Like, digital tool does it the best, because you can basically add another column, nothing will change, and in this column you'll say, okay, Josh did it, like Josh done. And or, like, more formally, like, quality check done. But after quality check there is another check. And so if you just put it as, like, check, generally you will have two people working in the same column, and they will be, like, just, you know pushing their shoulders and, like, why I cannot put it through the system because you haven't done your job, and blah blah blah. But if you just do it as, like, two separate steps, if they are really separate steps, then maybe it introduces, like, some kind of collaboration, but it's not really collaboration in the sense that XP, for example, promoted. Because XP is all about our developers, talking to each other and blah blah blah. But Kanban, it introduces flow and focuses on the flow. So the mid grinder doesn't really care if you put, like, if you have two people putting the meat into it. It just works, right? So yeah, in this way Kanban is a little bit weaker than the rest. I currently work with 5 different organizations, so most times I have a number of tasks spread across and in collaboration with different people. Uh huh. Ah, that's your background. Okay. I thought it was a different question. Also, some of my work is structured, recurrent tasks, for instance, and some reactive, and some reactive. How can Kanban help here? And some are reactive, right? Some work is reactive. How can Kanban help here? If the work is structured, well, Kanban helps here because if the work is structured in this analogy, it means that your meat comes in pre-sized, pre-cut cubes, right? That's it's structured. You always know what you can expect. Structured work is actually the best. It's like the perfect example to test with any kind of project management methodology, because structured work is like any waterfall project which can be managed by waterfall, which when you know exactly what's going to be output, it can definitely be managed by any other methodology too. It's just that all the other methodologies, they have some kind of built-in tools or like time frames to make sure that you include all the unexpected changes along the way. But if you don't have those unexpected changes, you just basically don't use those time frames and tools. So for example, in Scrum we have this meeting like sprint review and sprint retrospective that are solely that their purpose is to improve the work and to make sure that something unexpected doesn't happen in the next sprint. So essentially, if you have something really pre-organized and very like structured and very like you can know exactly what you can expect, then you just don't use those tools like the sprint review and sprint retrospective. So in Kanban too, like you just don't use, for example, the item agent because you know exactly how much it's going to take. Or you don't talk to other people while you're doing the job, while you're doing the work, because you essentially know what you need to do, and that then it's very structured. So, do I understand correctly your word about like structured, or maybe it's like structured as in you know exactly what you need to do, but you don't know whether on along the way there is going to be something like problematic or something like that. So, in what way is it structured? Because it can be a little bit different. Yeah, Awodonia, can you please write like what do you mean by structured, or ask by voice? I mean, it's okay. You can write. Yeah, because structured, as I described, it can be either like structured as in you know exactly that everything is going to go along like according to the plan, or it can be structured as in you have separate departments, or it can be structured as like literally you have like structure of your. Yeah, it can be structured in different ways. So I don't exactly understand. It's like you said, it's recurrent tasks, for instance. But do they recur because they like is it cyclical? Like cyclical, like as in a cycle, like recur tasks, the same stuff every single time, or is it cyclical because you just put something back, like this, like you have something that was done and then it's like recurring because it's like not done. So okay, let me describe both options. If it's cyclical because it's like wasn't really done, then just put it back into the meat grinder. It's okay, like it's recurring, it's okay. Kanban helps you to do that. You just pull back the ticket and like put it back in and count it as a separate piece of work. But then also it's item aging. I would suggest keep it like going so that it reflects in the actual data collection. It reflects that this item took a long time to complete, really long time to complete. Yeah, if it's cyclical and every single time. Oh, actually, you replied structured example, product marketing plans, constant market research, service, etc. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're perfect for Kanban. You can just create a ticket, which is like a template ticket, and then you can just put different things into it, so different details every time. And it's actually even better for Kanban because you can like create a bunch of tickets from the beginning and like put all the details in them, and then you can just pull them into the system and put them through. So I think perfectly fine for Kanban. Yeah, if any work. especially because it's like visualized, especially because it's a ticket on Jira, let's say, that you can go inside and like attach all the things that you've done, all the things that you worked on. It's perfectly fine, yeah, to manage it through Kanban. Yeah. I wouldn't even advise that, because I know that if you're doing product marketing plans, there are a bunch of other people that you have to work with. And Kanban introduces, especially in digital tools like Jira, it introduces focus. Like you can tag them in comments and say, okay, can you come in and like help me and something like that. So unfortunately, I can't right now show you. I can actually like show you like this. I can demonstrate my screen. I can just pull it like this and say open Jira. Jira. Oh, Jira. Or Monday.com is now promoting itself, so it's actually okay both. Monday.com. I believe they also have a Kanban board, and that's why it's fine. Work. Okay, that's a lot of information to actually fill. Why do they ask me to go through that? Kanban. Yeah, they literally give you a choice between Scrum and Sprint and Kanban. So I've created the Kanban board, I think. Or I can actually show it with Linear right now. Linear is another tool which is really easy to use. Projects. Uh, Back to app. Oh yeah. Okay, here it goes. Um, yeah. Where was it? Here. So yeah, you can see that this this is the board, and yeah, I can manage my stuff here in the board. And for example, in this task, I can tag somebody like this guy who is my friend. I tag him, and this guy will get a email notification like asking him to check this task. So yeah, you can, for example, if it's recurring, you can create like, let's say, week one task, and then add the description, and then after you change it, you go back and then you basically like copy it. So it's actually really easy to copy it. Wait a second, where is it? Can't find. Make a copy. Yeah, and then you can just name it as W2 task, save copy, and you can clone it as much as you want. And even if you do, like, even if you finish it, you can pull it back. So visual tools for Kanban became really, really developed over the time. This is one of many. This is another one, Monday.com. Um, let's say just, yeah, this is another Kanban. And even, I believe, even Notion has its own Kanban board. And even Teams, they also have Kanban board, which is called Planner. I'm currently using Planner because it's like free and really, really easy to use, but it doesn't have all the functions that I want, but it's okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's it for today on Kanban. Does anyone else have any other questions? ClickUp, yeah, ClickUp is definitely good. Yeah. Okay, thanks everyone for coming. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. I'm going to count to five. One, two, three, four, five. Oh, you have a question, Oduni? No. Okay. Well, yep. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day. I hope to see you in my next session. Next session is going to include extreme programming. And yeah, extreme programming is a really fascinating topic because I read one book. I read several books about extreme programming, but one of them, which is called Joy.inc, or Joy, like Joy, comma Inc. It's a wonderful, like really wonderful book. I recommend everyone who is involved in any kind of work to check it out, because principles from this guy's like company, they are applicable not only to software development but any kind of business. So I highly recommend reading this book. It's a book from a guy who founded a multi-million dollar company, maybe even like several $100 million company, which is basically one of the very first outsources of software. So they worked with IBM, with Google in the early stages, like as early as like 2000s, and they're massive, like massively successful with outsourcing and creating high level, high quality software for those big like tech giants, and their own software, proprietary software too. So there are only 150 people. So he explains, like the author explains a lot of principles that are applicable not only to software development but any kind of company. And one of them is, for example, like the rule of the tribe, I think, or something, which is essentially like, you once you have more than 150 people, you start losing connections between them, so they don't even remember each other's faces anymore. It becomes a big company, and they treat each other just like not as friends, not as colleagues, but like, yeah, you're just a passerby. So yeah, that's why he limited his company size to 150. And it's a bunch of other practices that were after that widely accepted in software development community. So I think they are very transition, like they are transferable to other spheres of life too. Highly recommend it if you want to visit my next session on extreme programming. Yeah, thank you very much and have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye.